Patti Breitman. First of all, how long have you been a vegan?
It's been 25 years. I became a vegan in 25 years ago. I'm not going to give you the year because I don't want to date your book or video, but it's been 25 years.
A lot of us, we're constantly asked, either if we're traveling somewhere or we're dinner with friends, they want to know, oh, you're vegan. Oh, that's interesting. What do you eat? Or what about the protein? Or what about the calcium? Or sometimes, and this is what's more encouraging, is that, oh, you know, I'd really like to eat that way, but I have no idea how to do it. What do you say to someone like that?
I was never interested in food or eating or cooking until I became a vegan. And I realized then that I had some low-level disgust at handling the chicken parts and the fish. And I used to do it because I had to, but I used to sort of cringe, and I was never good at cooking because I didn't want to spend a lot of time cooking. Then when I started working just with plant foods, I love being in the kitchen. It's so much fun because the foods are beautiful. They're colorful, and you don't have to do anything to them. You can eat a red pepper like an apple. You can eat a green pepper like an apple. You can have all this beautiful red cabbage coleslaw. It doesn't have to look white. The colors are just gorgeous. I get compliments on my grocery basket. So what I tell people is it's so much easier than you think it is because most of the food is just available as it is. If you hate to cook and you don't have time, you can eat most of the food I eat without any preparation at all. If you have 15 minutes a day or an hour a day on the weekends, you can prepare lavish, delicious feasts that you can eat all week. So what I tell people is it's a lot easier than you think, and it's more fun than you think, and food becomes an adventure in health and taste and texture, color and abundance. It's just a really fun, adventurous thing to do. And the side effects are you get a little healthier, you feel better, you're not causing any harm to animals or to the planet anymore. So to me, the reasons are so much more than just I want to be a vegan for myself. I'm a vegan now for the animals, for the planet, and because it happens to be healthy.
And it also gives them no excuse now if it's not going to be difficult, because that's the other thing, they think it's going to be hard.
Well, you'd be surprised. People come up with excuses. It's very hard to change the way people eat. What I learned in Will Tuttle's book, The World Peace Diet, is that whatever our mothers fed us to keep us alive as infants is the same thing that when we grew older, schools fed us when we had school lunch. And then when we got older and went to college, that's what we were fed. And if we went into the military, that's what we were fed. And if we go to hospitals, that's what we're fed. So the whole society conspires to make us think it's normal to eat these foods, get these diseases, gain this weight, and feel this way. When in fact, it's very hard for people to change. They'll still have excuses because it's so familiar and we trust our mothers and they do love us and they do what they think is best. But we're learning now that we may not have been fed the optimal diet our whole lives. So when we make a change, it's threatening to others. So people will still come up with excuses. I like to argue with those excuses, and I encourage them to read Will Tuttle's book to learn why we have to fight that impulse to do what's familiar. Because what's familiar is popping pills for all these conditions we get as we age and gaining weight as we age. None of that's necessary, but it's familiar, so it passes for normal. And I'd like to redefine normal as what's natural. What's natural isn't what's normal in the sense that everyone's doing it. At conferences of vegetarians, you see what's really normal, what's natural. But in terms of numbers, most people are doing it wrong. We can eat as much as we want if we're eating the right foods and not get those conditions and diseases that slow us down.
I think teenagers especially have a little bit of a torted idea about what consists of plant foods.
Well, at first, when you start becoming a vegan, I think it's okay to eat all the junk food you want because it's a transition and you want to feel like you're not giving up your favorite comforts. But over time, even those transition foods, the analog meats and the candies and ice creams that are vegan but aren't necessarily nourishing us, over time, I think we learn that the nourishing foods are even better. I've lost my craving for chocolate. Not that I don't still like chocolate, but I used to have to eat the whole candy bar if someone gave me a little bit. And now my taste buds have really changed. And I still like chocolate, but I don't crave it anymore. A bite is enough. It tastes a little bitter to me. And sometimes it's really fulfilling and nice. But I prefer avocado to chocolate. If I had my choice, I'd rather eat a whole avocado than a half a chocolate bar. So I think we have to give newbies, if you're very new to being a vegan, it's okay, I think, to overdo it on the junk food side for the first couple months, first year or two to get used to it. But as you immerse yourself in the culture of people who've been doing it a long time, you're encouraged to try the healthier versions, the healthier foods, to eat more greens and more colors in your diet. And the junk food gets a smaller and smaller section of it until it comes a point where it's not as attractive to you anymore.
Oh, that's fabulous. When teenagers especially, or maybe even not, they think that, well, I'll be vegetarian first. That means I can still have dairy products. And then the cheese becomes such a high area of their life.
I too had a lot of cheese when I first became a vegetarian. I was only a vegetarian for a year when I gave up the cheese. And I'll first say that it's easier to give up the cheese than it is to think about giving up the cheese. Thinking about it is really hard and scary, but doing it isn't that bad. I spent about a year transitioning to stop eating cheese, but then I read John Robbins' book, Diet for a New America, and I gave up cheese overnight. So now when I see cheese, I see suffering. The dairy cows taken from their mothers, days after they're born, we steal the milk from the mothers that's meant for the baby. Just like humans, the cows only give milk when they've had a baby. They don't give it because they're machines meant to give us milk. The milk is meant for their offspring, so they're kept pregnant. 9-month gestation, just like us. They care about their baby just like we do, but they're not even allowed to be with that baby after the first day after he's born. So it's very, and then if it's a female, she has the same miserable life where she's impregnated over and over again to give milk. Then when they stop being productive, meaning they're not giving milk at the levels we want them to, they're killed for hamburger meat. So there's so much suffering in dairy that I look at cheese now and I see suffering. But the good news is there are a number of new books and one old book that's a classic that help us make healthier versions of what we love about cheese. We love the texture, we love the fat in it, we love the flavor of it. And Joe Stepaniak's book, The Uncheesed Cookbook, or The Ultimate Uncheesed Cookbook, which is the 10th anniversary edition of that book, is just fabulous because I don't miss any of the cheeses. I make a Boursin, I make a cheddar, I make American cheese and cream cheese and sour cream, and her book has all these recipes for fabulous vegan versions, healthy versions. They're made with nuts or nutritional yeast, or some are made with tofu, but you get that texture and that satisfying mouth flavor, and you get everything you love about cheese you can have in a non-harming version that doesn't clog our arteries and doesn't make the cows suffer so much.
And then, of course, the other issue is protein. That to me is usually the first question I get many times, even before dairy. They're just so worried that if they're not having flesh of some sort, that there's just they'll just dwindle away because they don't have the protein.
That to me is a tragedy because people don't realize that the diseases in our country that people are suffering from aren't diseases of deficiency. We don't get scurvy or beriberi or protein deficiency in our country. If we're eating enough calories to maintain our weight, we're generally getting enough protein. Vegetarians and vegans get our protein from any bean product, including tofu, but it doesn't have to be soybeans. Just eating beans at every meal, a tortilla or a black bean soup, a lentil soup, hummus, anything made with lentils, anything made with beans, anything made with tofu or tempeh, anything made from a bean is going to have plenty of protein in it. And some people say, I can't tolerate beans, I don't digest them well. Your body adjusts to it. You don't digest them because you're not eating enough, probably. If you start with the smaller beans like lentils and split peas and start having maybe a half a cup of soup for lunch every day or for dinner, then you move up to the bigger beans, chickpeas, and the milder beans. Then you can eat red beans in all the great Mexican dishes that call for beans. Almost every cuisine in the world has beans of some sort, and they're all good for us, and they're all delicious, and there are countless recipes to use them. So getting the protein isn't really the problem. There's also tons of protein in nuts. If we have a handful of nuts every day on our breakfast cereal or as a snack in the afternoon or even on a salad at dinner, sunflower seeds have plenty of protein. You can get them tamari roasted. You can have them raw. You can soak them and make wonderful pastes out of them. You can make cashew cream out of cashews that you soak in water overnight. There's no shortage of protein, so I start with that. But I want to make the major point that the diseases we're getting in this country are not diseases of deficiency. Nobody's not getting enough protein. They're diseases of excess. We're eating way too much, and we're getting cancer and diabetes and obesity and heart disease and stroke and impotence, and all these diseases are from clogged arteries and the wrong food and too much of the wrong food. So getting too much protein is an issue in this country, and it is leading to all kinds of problems. Getting too much protein in our country and the wrong kinds of protein is leading to all kinds of conditions and diseases that are totally absent in cultures that don't eat the kind of animal protein that we eat.
Oh, it's so true. And the government puts out the food groups that we're to have, and I know the levels of protein are far in excess of what we really need.
Well, this year for the first time, the guidelines for Americans on what we should eat included nuts and beans and seeds in the protein category. It's not just about meat anymore. And the countries around the world that have the longest lived people, the least amount of cancer, have the least amount of cheese intake, the least amount of dairy intake, the least amount of meat intake. So none of the animal flesh or dairy that everyone thinks is their source of protein is really doing them any good. It's satisfying a flavor. It's a lifelong habit that's very soothing. But as I said, there's so much suffering behind it, not just our own human suffering. The planet can't take raising all these cows because we're cutting down rainforests to give land for growing food to feed the cows. And we need the rainforest, but we're destroying them. And we're taking the babies from their mothers, which is just heartless in my book. And it's hurting us. We have epidemic proportions of heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes. There's no reason for any of it. We can get the flavor, the texture, the protein, the satisfaction of cheese with plant-based versions of cheese.
Mm-hmm. You have a favorite recipe that you use?
My favorite is called a boursin, but I don't tell people it's boursin. I tell people it's a white bean dip because it's made with white beans. And its secret ingredient, it's from Joe's book, Joe Stepaniak's book, The Ultimate Uncheese Cookbook. And the secret ingredient is called umeboshi plum paste. It's a kind of, you can buy it in any Japanese store, any Asian store, or any natural food store. And it's a red plum that's fermented and very salty, and they make a paste from that plum. And that paste...
It's actually kind of reddish.
It's very red, and I'm told in the winter to suck on a whole plum like that to build your immune system during cold season. But it's an acquired taste when you eat it by itself. It's very strong, very salty, very powerful.
But the paste is very salty.
The paste is very concentrated, very salty. You only use a little bit of it, but that in a white bean dip with some other ingredients. I'm not going to give away her recipe here. But that's my favorite because everyone who eats it loves it. It's a surprising flavor because most people aren't familiar with umeboshi plum paste, but it's very satisfying.
Can you spell it?
Umeboshi, U-M-E-B-O-S-H-I, I think.
Yeah, I think
it's also called ume. There's ume plum vinegar too. They make a vinegar from the same plum, and ume vinegar is a wonderful ingredient. I make something called a dragon bowl that's just brown rice or quinoa on the bottom, steamed broccoli with avocado on top with sesame seeds sprinkled all over it, and I sprinkle ume plum vinegar all over it, and that's a vinegar made from this umeboshi plum. And everyone loves it, and the only seasoning is the vinegar.
Oh, that's
It's
fabulous.
a salty vinegar with an unusual tang to it, but it's a fabulous, easy recipe.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, I know that you helped in publishing with a lot of the greats in the vegan world, medical doctors with their publications. So I know that you, just in the process of doing that, you have to learn so much information.
It was like being in college and choosing my own professors. My clients were doctors and registered dietitians and health experts and triathletes and marathon runners, and I learned everything from them. The year that I went vegan, I ran the New York City Marathon. I had so much energy, I was bouncing off the wall. I'd never run more than 6 miles in my life. And I had all this energy, and someone said, why don't you run the marathon? I said, good idea, I'm going to do it. And I trained and I ran it, and I finished it.
That's fabulous.
And I wasn't even toward the end of the women. I wasn't toward the beginning. I was toward the end of the middle, but I wasn't in the bottom. I wasn't in the bottom third. I was like the bottom of the middle third.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And I was thrilled.
Oh, yes.
And that was just all that extra energy I had from being a vegan.
The other thing that some of us have found, or people trying to transition, is that they don't get agreement from their family. They feel as though they're a lone wolf and that they're going to be criticized. And when you don't have agreement, it makes it even more difficult. Yeah.
I agree, it's much harder if you don't have family support, but that's why in my book, How to Say No Without Feeling Guilty, I talk about it's much easier to say no to anything if you know what you're saying yes to. So if you know what you're doing is right for yourself, for the planet, for animals, if you know in your heart that this is really the right thing to do, it's easier to still express love to your family and gratitude to them and really understand they're fearful. They don't want to not support you. They're just fearful because they don't know what you know. They're afraid you're not going to be nourished well. They're afraid it's not going to work. They're afraid you're doing something that no one in their family's ever done. You have to be very, very gentle and loving and supportive of them and think they're the ones who are afraid. You can be confident and say yes to the choices you're making because you know they're in the best interest of your heart and your health and the world around you. I also recommend anyone making the transition in any kind of hostile environment, whether it's family or friends or anyone making fun of you or not supporting you or not wanting to help you. Now that we have technology, anyone can get a support system. You can go you can go to Craigslist and ask, are there any other vegetarians or vegans in this neighborhood? I want to get together once a week and talk. Or are there any other vegetarians who want to get together and read a book together, or want to get together for a meal, or want to have a potluck? If there isn't already a group in your area that's doing this, you can start one. Invite people out for tea. to have a support system, even if it's just virtual. Are there people I can write to every week because my family's not supportive and I need to bounce ideas off of people? So
Oh, that's a fabulous idea.
we can make our own community. In fact, one of the speakers here always says hello. I'm at a North American Vegetarian Society Summerfest, and one of the speakers here always starts with, "Hello, my chosen family," because she knows that her family of birth isn't the same receptive, loving, supportive, vegan mindset that everyone here has. Here are 700 people who all know this is the right thing for us. They're fearful, and just as you want their support for your diet, they need your support for your love, because it feels like a rejection. It feels like you're not accepting the food they're offering, you're not accepting their lifestyle is good enough for you. And so they're really making a bid for your acceptance and love just as much as you are for theirs. And if you can frame it that way and remember that these people really do care for me, they're just scared to death for me, and they think I'm nuts because they've never heard of this before.
People tend to like or suggest green drinks for energy, or if you're sick, or if you're even with people with some chronic diseases. It seems they're the first thing a lot of people are told is you've got to have some green drinks. How do you feel, or do you drink green drinks?
I do, and I don't know anything about healing from sickness. That's not my specialty.
Right.
But I like to stay well with my green smoothie for breakfast. For years, I only ate fruit for breakfast. This is left over from Fit for Life in 1985, a book I edited years ago. But I like to eat fruit in the morning. I can't eat anything heavy in the morning. It just doesn't agree with me. But then I learned about smoothies. So I would make a smoothie every morning with a banana and any other fruit that's ripe. And I used to use soy milk in it. So a banana, soy milk, and blueberries, say, or peaches. Or then I learned about green smoothies. And now my breakfast is that fruit smoothie. But I add hands full of either kale or collards or spinach or arugula or any green I can find. I'm growing purslane in my garden, so I put hands full of that in too. Any green at all that's edible. You clean it, you put it in your blender with the fruit and make a fruit smoothie. But I've substituted for the soy milk in my blender. Now I use water because I fill it so high with greens and they're very high water content.
Yeah.
And the other fruit, I feel like it's too heavy. If I want a smoothie in the middle of the day, I'll make it with soy milk or rice milk. But for breakfast, I just use water with hands full. I don't even measure. I just grab a few hands full of kale leaves, collard leaves, without the central stem. Just take it off the central stem. But kale or collards or chard or spinach, and it's one that I know kids like. I once gave this to kids and they loved it. And they told their parents, "Come taste this, come taste this." The entire smoothie is just water, a banana.
Now that's a frozen banana or a regular banana?
I use a regular banana because I never remember to freeze them. Traditionally, it's a frozen banana, but my berries are frozen.
A peeled frozen banana.
A peeled frozen banana, but traditionally that's the way to make a smoothie. I freeze the berries instead. When they're in season, I buy lots of them and freeze them, and then I buy frozen berries when they're not in season. But I made one that kids loved, and the only ingredients were water, a banana, spinach, fresh spinach, and frozen mango. Ooh. It's absolutely delicious. If you've ever had a spinach salad with pieces of mango in it, this is the same thing, just in a blender. And you blend it, I drink it all morning, so I sort of sip my breakfast, I take a walk in the morning and then I come back and I sip my breakfast between about 9 and 11 o'clock.
Wow.
So it takes me 2 hours to drink my breakfast, but I love it.
So is it taste more on the green side or the fruit side?
It tastes more on the banana side. Usually the banana is the strongest flavor, and if it tastes a little too green, sometimes I put too much kale and it's like a strong kale, or if I put too much arugula and it's too strong, I'll add cinnamon. I'll put I'll just shake the cinnamon in it, and then it tastes like cinnamon. But the kale I actually have come to like. It's just it can be too strong. It depends when I've harvested. I'm growing in my garden kale and chard.
Oh my goodness.
And I go out about twice a week and take a few days worth, keep it refrigerated, rinse it off, take the stem off, and just throw it in the blender.
Fabulous. You mentioned purslane, and I think that's a lot of people had never even heard
I
of that.
had never heard of purslane until
Can you
someone told
spell
me
that one?
Purslain, and it's a little tiny plant. It only grows about 4 or 5 inches tall, and you snap off the stem, take the leaves off the stem, and put the leaves in. I put it in salads too. It's crunchy and delicious. It's lemony. It tastes like lemon.
Something that can be found growing wild
Someone
too.
told me it's a very common weed, and I had never heard of it.
Yes.
But I planted a section of my garden with it because somebody told me it's the highest plant-based food with omega-3 fatty acids in it. So in addition to flax seeds, which I often add to my shake too, my smoothie.
And you grind them first?
I grind the flax seeds in a coffee grinder and keep them in the freezer about a week's worth at a time. And then I put them in my smoothie for breakfast. But the purslane is very tasty. It tastes like lemon. It's very light and crunchy, and when I'm in the garden, I eat it just right out of the ground. I just snap it off and
And
eat
if
it.
somebody doesn't have access to that, and they would want that little tiny tin, you could squeeze a little lemon juice probably. in a
Absolutely.
smoothie.
You could add a little lemon juice for the same flavor. It just gives it a little bite.
Oh, Patti, thank you so much. We
Oh,
could
it's
go
my
on and
pleasure.
share recipes for the rest of the day. My goodness.